Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Beverly Hills Cop. So, this movie is the perfect example of when eventually you have sequels and franchise and whatever, that simple is the obvious, way to go about doing these films. I think when we really go on, the sequels were to get far too goofy, far too complicated, and were to try to do, such unique story that no one could eventually believe that these people are doing these crimes, or why is Eddie Murphy uh, eventually going on and doing a detective thing with mascots doesn't quite make sense anymore. But anyways, but we do have it to where we have a cast of actors who are all to be right for this role. Every bit of every choice that was made was perfect. We go on and even have something as small as a character like Surge, who a lot of people remember from this movie, and that's kind of so surprising that eventually people will be like, you know what, why does this person look so familiar? Oh yeah, Beverly Hills Cop. Or eventually, guys like Judge Reinhold will eventually be called out for Fast Times at Richmond High, or eventually any number of these cats will be kind of named off for something else. But anyways, with that said, I immediately thoroughly enjoy this film. I would have to go on and I would want to say that it is a solid good film. I want to say that it's great, but for me, there's a lot of times where I just can't believe an officer would kind of go out of their way to do things to kind of help a stranger in this case, and that stranger would really just be Axel in this movie. But then also Axel is to have a lot of really good hunches, but still, there's a whole procedure of things, and do people want to risk their job to go on and just go on a hunch? Especially with a guy who has nothing to lose because he's technically on vacation, who is Axel Foley. He might be losing his job, but eventually he is to possibly get back to Detroit. But eventually Axel is really just a guy who's on vacation, supposedly. So teeing it up, let's go into what actually technically happens through this story, and then I'll kind of leave some off to get us into spoilers, trying to be as vague as possible. Um, so I want to say solid good, but definitely would say go out of your way to watch this. A lot of people probably feel like my grading is too soft. Maybe it's epic, maybe it's great. um I don't know. For me, honestly, very rarely do I enjoy detective movies that are simply detective films. It always has to have some kind of thing with it, like a comedy, or it has to have a very really unique story to make me just really have the attention span that I would for a detective movie. Because normally I'd just be like, man, this movie's so boring. But this movie wasn't. This movie was fun. And plus, also, we have it to where we have Eddie Murphy who's going on and doing these certain characters to try to make his way into having people believe that he is this person, so that way they go on and they trust him, or they go on and they tell him okay, you go on and do that yourself. So teeing it up, so we have it to where Axel is to go and be in Detroit and meet up with an old friend named Mikey. It seems that Mikey is to have a fairly shady past, and so at one point was Axel, but it seems that Axel had found a way to turn around his life and become a cop instead. So Axel is to find out one way or the other, because he's present during this moment, that his friend is to be killed, and so now Axel has to go on and he has to find out what had happened to Mikey, and there is no one that's going to stop him. As well as we go on, we have his superior, who is Inspector Todd, who is just like, you know what, Axel, you were like on like the last straw. Like, I had my superiors who were chewing out my butt, and and it's all because of you. so so we go on and we have Axel, who goes to Beverly Hills because Mikey is to tell a story leading up to this moment of why Mikey is now with Axel. And so Axel is to go on and check out these people that Mikey had previously worked with, and that is to turn around and lead him to eventually be arrested and go on and meet the Beverly Hills cops. As we consistently have it to where both Axel and these Beverly Hills cops are kind of working together. They like quickly become the best of friends, really just because these guys are to eventually find a way to kind of relax a little, like realize that their job isn't going to always be in jeopardy, and just to kind of live a little. So with that said, let's just go on into that double five time territory. Currently, this movie is available on Showtime. There is a free week trial if you want to just kind of test the waters of Showtime anyways. But I'll also give you a certain number of apps that I've used over time that it seems now every single one of these would probably have to go on and have a Google search being done to find them, because I found out that the other app that I would recommend to people, doesn't exactly have the easiest search like it was at some point. So I guess I have to go on and change the way in which that I recommend things. But it is what it is. So with that said, going on to a Google search, you can search the word C movies apps, so that's letter C. Hopefully you can go on and Google search this, find this app, download it, and be able to see that you can see consistently anything. Premium access stuff, a number of app exclusive items like a stars or a by and large anything that would have exclusive content, Netflix, all that jazz. We'd also go on and have you also look at an app called Fox HD Movies. Regardless of probably what I say next, this may hinder or help you eventually also find this app also. Because eventually, through a Google search, you may go on and be able to find a logo that says Fox HD Movies, but a title that says something different. They'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. You can also go onto a Google search, because I guess this is now very much more difficult to find than it was. You can go on and Google search two letters called TV Crush, and you'll go on and find a a link that says like HD movies 123, and that actually is the actual app that TV Crush is now, weirdly. Or eventually you can kind of scroll through and see which one you would want to go on and eventually download it, whatever you would like to do. Or eventually you can just probably rent this movie for a certain amount of money. Or also you can go on a Google Play Store and just kind of search the word movie apps. Just kind of see what pops up. Eventually you can go and find certain apps that eventually will let you be able to see everything for absolutely free. Maybe you'll go on and see some ads, something like that. But anyways, let's just go on and double fight this bad boy up. I think it's about that time. Beverly Hills Cop is a good movie. were people expecting me to be like, no, boo? No, this is a great movie. I enjoy it. The jokes still work, even though you go on and you have like the banana on the tailpipe. That joke is kind of a little old because I knew it was coming from a million miles away. Um, but everything else was kind of like still funny. So with that said, let's level 5 this bad boy up. It's about that time yet again to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this film, we have it where Axel Foley is going and speaking to these two men that they're kind of uneasy about talking to Axel or whoever he's supposed to be undercover as. And so we go on and we have this this guy who's to possibly be this dealer. And so Axel is wanting to provide him with a number of boxes of cigarettes. And we have it to where Foley's really like amping up, like, man, these cigarettes, like, man, like they sell themselves, like it's a tax write-off and this and that. So it's a federal tax stamp. Look at this. So we go on and we have this dealer that's kind of like, like, you know what, I'm tempted, but like instead of the 5,000 that I told you that I had, I only have $2,000. Like, will like you go on and give me this stuff for $2,000, and then the next time around we have this deal, like I'll pay the rest off in interest. And Axel's like, no, like I'm not interested in that. So we all of a sudden have this cop car that looks kind of like goofy to me. Like it doesn't look like the normal cop car. It just kind of looks like this like generic car with this like this siren on top of it. And I was like, okay, like that was kind of weird. So these two cops come out of this car, and we have it where these police officers are looking at Axel and looking at this guy, and we have Axel making up this story that this truck was to break down. And so the dealer and the other guy are kind of backing up a little bit, as the dealer is kind of friend is to go on to the front of the truck to eventually take control of this truck and drive it off. So we have Axel, who before this truck is to drive off is to tell these police officers, it's like, well, hey, like, wouldn't you know it, officer? Yeah, like my truck, it broke down. Like, can you help me? And so this officer is like, why do you look so familiar to me? And all of a sudden, like, the dealer's like, the jig is up. And so we have these guys, the dealer and of course the other assistant guy, who are driving off with this truck, driving like crazy. And so of course with the weight of this truck, it seems that it's only a matter of time before eventually like these guys aren't going to be able to outrace the police. So eventually this truck does, because it's kind of has this kind of weird way about it. It has like this one truck, and then it has this kind of like truck attached to it weirdly, to where it's like, man, if you're driving really fast, the weight of that like second compartment is eventually going to easily tip over, and so it does. So we go on and we have Axel that is to go on and arrest these guys and turn them in. And so now, of course, we have it where Axel is really in hot water at this point. We have Jeffrey that's going on and telling Axel, it's like, well, hey, like, you need to go on and like kind of wait in this office. Axel's like, no, because I know what's gonna happen. Like, I'm gonna get fired. I'm not gonna, no. And so we have to where Jeffrey's telling Axel here, it's like, well, no, you need to go on and wait here. So Axel is making to his locker. Of course, Inspector Todd is there, and he is chewing Axel out, going on and saying um, about him getting his rear end being chewed out by his superiors, and like one more little thing out of Axel, and like he's had it with him. So Axel, of course, to go on and just be like, well, like your superiors didn't chew all your butt. Like, Inspector Todd's like, don't push me. So, as we also have like Jeffrey, also at his locker, he's like, oh, this is my locker, and he walks off. Oh my god. So we go into this story, and Axel is to make his way home, realizing that his old friend of his, Mikey, is to break in. And so Axel is like telling like Mikey, it's like, well, hey, like, why did you break into my place? And Mikey's like, well, you have a weak lock. Like you have a job. Like, why can't you pay for a better lock? And Axel's like, well, I do have a better lock. It's called a gun. If anybody comes in here, I shoot them. So we have to where Axel and Mikey are catching up like it's old times, and so we also have Mikey who's to go on and give Axel these bear bonds that obviously feels like he stole them. Because this guy is to just, he can't help himself. It's like an itch that he can't scratch to go on and do something illegal. To the point of Mikey wanting to tell Axel, like, hey man, like, how about we just steal a car? And Axel's like, no, like, I can't do that anymore. I'm a police officer. And Mikey's like, oh, I'm just kidding, you know? So, because Axel and Mikey are going to the bar, catching up on old times. So, Mikey is to mention that he was to take this job as a security guard of all things. And Axel's like, really? You? Security guard? And Mikey's like, well, yeah, like, I went on and took this job from an old friend of ours, like, you remember Jenny? And Axel's like, yeah, of course I remember Jenny. Probably don't, but the script tells me that I do. And so we have Mikey that's going on to like, yeah, like I'm working with her, and that kind of led him to eventually working with Victor Maitland, and so eventually that's where Mikey is probably going to have to run for the hills at some point with these bearer bonds that he borrowed, possibly. So after Axel and after Mikey return to Axel's place, come to find out we have a hitman of sorts. That one of them, of course, would be a guy named Zach, who we'll see some more later, and eventually the other guy I think we'll see by the end of the film. But you'll know that by eventually them going on and referencing the deed of which that they had done. So we have it to where all of a sudden Axel is trying to get to his door and trying to balance Mikey. And so we have Axel who tries to open this door. All of a sudden we have Axel who ends up getting attacked. He falls over and he ends up getting hit in the back of the head. We now have Zach who is questioning Mike and just saying, like, hey, like, why did you take the bonds, Mikey? Like, I was only going to borrow them. And so we go on and we have Mikey, who, of course, is going to be killed here by Zach, and then walked away. So we have it, of course, where Axel is filing this report, and we, of course, have Axel, who is talking to his superior yet again, Inspector Todd. And so we have to Axel is to mention that the guy that is working on what should actually be Axel's case, like, this guy had been sitting on a desk for 12 years, and like this guy is probably going to have like a lot of rust and so on and so forth. But Inspector Todd, it's like, well, hey, at least he's been a detective for 12 years. And Axel's like, no, like let me work this case. Let me at least ask some people some questions. And Inspector Todd's like, no. Like if you even like if I even get a hint of you like going on and trying to solve this case, I'm gonna fire you. I'm gonna put you up on charges. I'm gonna fire you, Inspector Todd. So Alex is to go on and say, well, fine. Like, you know what? Like, I have some vacation days saved up. So, like, I want to go on and use them. And so Inspector Todd's like, well, okay. Like, after you're to go on and kind of nurse your wound there, because I want you to go to the hospital, you're going to be on vacation. So, we have Axel that goes, of course, supposedly on vacation to Beverly Hills. And we Avatar Axel is to go into this like kind of 4-star hotel, and supposedly the bill for this 4-star hotel is like $230 something a night. And so we have Axel who is making his way to this hotel and saying like, well, yeah, like you're looking for Axel Foley, and they're like, no, the name's not here. And he's like, well, like, how dare you not say the name's not here? Like, I want to be put into a better room because you guys can't find me on this paperwork. And, like, I'm going on and I'm doing a whole piece about Michael Jackson and how he's going to be on the top of the world, like, in your hotel. But now, like, he's going to be on the top of the world of somewhere else. And so we have this manager that steps in and is like, well, I'm sorry, sir. Like, how about I go on and I give you a penthouse at the like regular rate of a normal room? And so Axel's like, okay, I'll take that then. And he's like, okay, well, that's 230 some odd dollars. And Axel's like, oh my god, I went to the wrong hotel. So, but I'm sure every single one of the Beverly Hills hotels will probably be ridiculously expensive anyways. But Axel is stealing every robe that he possibly can, as well as probably soaps, tissue paper, who knows what else. So, probably if there's silverware or whatever, when eventually he gets food, that's probably gone too. Anyways, so, as if he's some kind of thief. So, we have Axel that makes his way to meet up with his old friend Jenny, because he's kind of following the trail of which that Mike was to kind of give him. So we have Axel going and meeting with Jenny Summers, and we of course have Axel meeting with a guy named Serge. And so Axel and Serge are talking about this piece about this dinner table with these people's like heads on the dishes, and like I think the butler is in chains. And so Axel's going on like, so you guys seriously like sold something like this? And Serge is like, well, yeah, like we sold it. And he's like, really? Like, okay, I can't believe that, but okay, like you guys made a load of money off of that. All right. So Axel is to go on and talk to Serge and say like, hey, I'm looking for Jenny, like I'm an old friend, Axel Foley. And Serge of course cannot pronounce Axel correctly, and so he's saying like any other thing besides that. And so we also had the guy that Serge is telling this to, like he's kind of not buttoned up. So Axel goes on and is to have this guy being sent. So Jenny is to go on and see, oh yeah, Axel, like my old friend. And so she's going to go on and kind of have some quick time with Axel. So we have Axel and we have Jenny that are meeting together. And so we have Axel that's going on and saying like, well, yeah, I'm here for because of Mikey. And Jenny's like, well, don't tell me he's in trouble again. And Axel's like, no, Jenny, he's dead. So Jenny's like, oh my god, well, like Axel, like, you know what, like, I am like just very busy today. Like, what do you need? And so Axel's going on and asking like, what was Mikey involved in, um, when he was kind of working with her. And so Jenny is going and talking and referencing a guy named Victor Maitland. And so that, of course, is to lead Axel to go on to like, okay, like, all right, well, that's the next stop on my list of people to find. So Axel is to eventually want to like do some catching up with Jenny, probably go on and have like a drink or two, because we're gonna like keep this kind of relationship like going within this film. So we have Axel that just makes his way to Victor Maitland's office, supposedly delivering flowers. And the secretary is telling Axel, it's like, well, I'm sorry, sir, but you can't deliver these flowers. And Axel's like, well, I have to. It's my job, and this and that. And so he walks up this flight of stairs, makes it to Victor Maitland's office. So I guess drop the flowers somewhere and go straight into Victor's office and start talking to him, like wanting to know information. And Victor is to go on and say absolutely nothing and just take Axel and pull a John Cena Marine movie, if you guys were ever to see that movie. Especially the beginning of it, where like John Cena is this security guard and he has to deal with kind of these rich, like, silver spoon people all day. And so at one point, John Cena is take this guy, be upset with him, and just chuck him out this massive window, because I guess a door wouldn't do. So we go on, we have a number of men because of how just really intimidating Eddie Murphy is with his muscles, and you know. So there's a number of men that have to go on and chuck Eddie Murphy out this window. And he'd be like, hey man, like, what the heck? Like, do you guys just chuck people out a window? Like, yeah, like, isn't that always ridiculous? I don't know how many times in so many movies, especially horror films, but I don't know how many times people be like breaking through windows, and I never understood why that was always a thing. Did people just have glass to burn, or what? Literally or metaphorically, but still. I'm like, man, like, I get you that you want to do something interesting in a film, but like putting a double through a glass window, I don't know if that'd be one of them. It just feels like you're just begging to want somebody to actually get hurt through a film, or eventually get stabbed or whatever. But it is what it is, I guess. So we have it right after that, right after the glass chucking. We have two Beverly Hills cops that are going on like, excuse me, sir, like you have the right to remain silent. And we go on and we have Axel, who's going in this cop car, and he's like, man, this is the cleanest cop car I've ever seen. Like, man, like, I've never seen a cop car so clean. So Axel is to be accompanied to the police officers to this station. So we, of course, have now Billy Rosewood and Sergeant Taggart, who are going on and questioning what exactly Axel was doing in this location. Really, this is to all lead up to Axel just saying like, yeah, man, like, I just went to the bathroom and somebody threw me out a window. Isn't that crazy? And so the more and more we have these two men going on and wanting to question this man further, because it's like, well, hey, like, why didn't you like immediately identify yourself as a police officer? And like Axel's like, well, technically I was on vacation, so. And it's like, well, hey, why did you have your gun? Well, because like in Detroit, like cops are allowed to have guns even if they're on vacation. So we then go on and have Lieutenant uh, Bogomil. You guys can't. You guys have to have like goofy names for everybody. Let's get some goofy names for everyone. Can we? My name is Sergeant Floobly-Hoo. You know what I'm saying? Sergeant Floobly-Hoo. Everybody remember that. Never. Anyways. So, we have Bogomil who goes in and like, well, sir, like, it seems like we found out that you're a police officer and we've informed your superior, Inspector Todd, that you're here going on uh, and doing all this and vacation and so the inspector Todd is thinking that when you come back, like you're probably like going to be fired after that. So we have Axel that is like, regardless of what Bogomil is going to say here, he's going to continue what he's going to do regardless. So now both Rosewood and Taggart are now having to stick to Axel and are to, of course, do stakeouts to eventually just kind of like see where this leads with Axel and him like stubbornly going on and him wanting to solve this case. Because, of course, we have it where Bogomil was informed by Todd that Axel was to go on and try to solve this case. So we have it where Axel is to be put in upon jail, and Jenny is to go on and bail Axel out. And Jenny is to go on and tell Axel that she's not going to bail him out a second time. So we have it where Axel and Jenny are driving off. So Axel is to spot that there is a tail present, and he assumes that it's of course Taggart and Rosewood. So we go on and we have Axel that is to make his way back to his place, and he is to go on and order room service for both these guys. And while they're going on and scarfing down this delicious, I'm sure, room service food that is weirdly just now like car side to go, because I guess they have that kind of goofy service now. We have, of course, Axel going to the ground floor, asking this guy who's a banana man within IMDb, but he's Damon Wayans. And we have Axel that's like, yeah, like I would just like a couple of different bananas. How much is that going to cost me? And Damon Wayans like, you take these bananas. You just take these bananas. So Axel goes on, takes the bananas, and of course is to do the banana in the tailpipe moment. We also had a dialogue between both Jenny and Axel where Jenny was to go on and remember that Axel used to drive this kind of beat up light blue car, and Jenny was to go on and ask Axel like, well, hey, like, whatever happened to that car? And Axel's like, I still drive it. Man, like, I don't know how many times you would probably go on and you would have like a lot of cars in a lot of movies that would be really unique, because a lot of times they would just look like box cars, because that's what they would just look like. So we have Axel that is kind of putting the bananas in the tailpipe. The waiter is kind of looking back, and Axel's like, so we have Axel who is to go on and surprise these detectives, get in his car, drive off. We have it to Rosewood is just so hungry, and Taggart is like, hey, we got to get out of here. Like, he's moving. So Axel, of course, is to go on and drive off. And so now we have the two detectives trying to go on and chase after, but their car stops working. So now both of these detectives have realized they've been pranked, they've been punked, they've been whatever. Ashton Kutcher just comes out of the shadows. That is far to the wrong decade, but moving on. So now that Rosewood and Taggart are in deep crap, we now have to have two other detectives that I guess are to be the number 2 team, but they want to say that they're the number 1 team with a banana in the tailpipe. Anyways, these other guys are kind of swooping in of like, yeah, here's our time to shine. So we have Axel that is going off and is following Victor Maitland. He's going and doing a stakeout of his own to wait for this guy to kind of make it out of his house. So we have it to where the other team are to make their way to spot where Axel is. And so now we end up getting, of course, we're not going to fall for the banana in the tailpipe. And Axel goes on to like, wow, like that delivery, it's like, seems like you've been hanging out with this guy for far too long. It should be, we're not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. But instead, it's like, we're not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. Like, come on. So we have it where Axel is to go on and do this stakeout, and he's finally admitting to these two detectives that he's probably seen enough because we have this car who's starting to back out of this house. So we have Axel that is to go on and showcase these two detectives. Hey, do you guys want a beer, or you guys want a like piece of chicken or something like that? So going on, Axel is to kind of like just kind of quickly go through some things, and the detective's like, you're having a stakeout here, and he's like, no. So Axel then goes on and is to follow Victor Maitland and is to eventually make it to this restaurant. We also have at one time where Axel is also going with Jenny, because I want to get to this also. Axel's going on with Jenny and making it into this warehouse where they kind of do like shipments and stuff like that. So Axel, of course, is to go into this warehouse and spot there's one box with coffee grounds, and that's a dead giveaway that there's possibly going to be Coke within this box. So we have Axel that eventually is to continue this investigation, as he is to follow where this box is going to get delivered, and then he's going to pose as some customs agent so he can go on and get the paperwork for this box, for this delivery. And we have it at one point where Axel is to go on and say like, hey, like, security officer, do you happen to have a match? And then Axel is to go on and tell this like manager, this supervisor, that this security guard was going to give this customs agent this match. Like, oh, how dare you? So Axel wanted to know what this box was and to figure out if there's another shipment coming soon to theaters near you. So anyways, let's push on. So Axel is to now go on to this restaurante, this interesting fine dining establishment. And we have where Axel is to meet with this greeter, and we have Axel saying like, well, I'm here to go on and see Victor Maitland. And the greeter is to go on and tell, or the hostess, whatever the title usually is for that, like, well, like, what is this to be pertaining? And so Axel's going on saying, like, well, yeah, uh, like I just told from one of my friends that like one of my friends had gotten herplex 10, and now I think I have it, and so now I have to go and tell Victor, uh, just in case anything starts falling off on the man, what it is. And so we have this hostess that's like, yeah, I think you need to go on and you need to tell him that personally. He's like, well, thank you. And so he goes on to this place to speak to Victor. So immediately, Zach is coming running to try to get at Axel. Axel is to flip Zach onto this table, and Zach ends up getting up like all disheveled. And Victor is just like, you know what? Like, how about you just kind of, like, Zach, you just kind of just stand down. And Axel goes on and like, oh, like, teach him any other tricks, like sit, play dead. Yeah. Anyways, so Axel is to finally get the talking with Victor that he of course want in this public place. So we of course have it to where Axel is to tell Victor, it's like, well, hey, I know that you went on and killed my friend, and I'm gonna figure out a way to like figure out how to like get to you, kind of thing. So Victor is going on like, you know what? I don't think you know who you're messing with. Yeah, oh no, things are gonna happen. Things are getting scary. So we go on and again have police officers that are going and going to escort Axel out. So Axel again is to be arrested. Again is to be brought to this police station. And now finally we have Chief Hubbard who is getting involved in this. And so we have Bogomil that is now like furious with Axel out of all the stuff that he has gone on and done at this point. And so we have Chief Hubbard that is coming in there and is rattling off every single thing that Axel has done since the time that he got here. Was like, is this the man that went on and was to break a window and was to go on and assault this man in this restaurant? And is this the same man to go on and do this and that? And so they're like, yes, sir. So we have it to our Chief Hubbard is to, of course, tell Axel, it's like, well, like, you must be the pride of your department, I'm sure. So Chief Hubbard is having some alone time with Bogomil. Probably like saying like, hey, like, do you remember your lines? Yeah, I got nothing. So hey, do you need some help? Because we ain't got nothing else to do. So we have both of them going into this office, and we have Axel that's going on like, is this the man that... And so Rosewood and Taggart are telling Axel to like, hey, shut up. And Axel's like, what, is he gonna hear me? And they're like, yes. That would have been funny if he would have like been able to just point that out. They're like, yes, Axel, I heard every word that you said. Just to give him like weird, creepy vibes. So and I haven't even gotten to the bar scene yet, but I'll get to that. Like, I know I forgot about it, but I'm going to get right back to it because I feel like there's some interesting things to be had here. So, because I know that or Chief Hubbard uses that as a thing within his, like, is this the man who took both of these detectives to this strip joint and eventually took down these men who were robbers and so on and so forth? Like, I knew that was a thing that I forgot about, but I know it happened, so we'll get to that. So, so we're gonna backpedal a little bit. So Bogomil is to now say that the chief was to tell Taggart and Rosewood that Axel is to be escorted out of city limits and is to uh, eventually pack his things, like he's out of here. So now let's go back to that bar scene. So we have Axel who is hanging out with Rosewood and Taggart because again they're consistently watching over him because after the two other detectives failed, we now have it to where Axel is to go on and meet up with both Rosewood and Taggart and tell him it's like, hey guys, like I brought you guys food. Did you guys like the food? And Rosewood was like, yeah, I like the food. And we have to where Taggart is like, oh, like you did that to like spite us. And Axel's like, no, like not at all. Like I did that from the heart. Like I know like guys who go on stakeouts and like I wanted you to give you guys the best food, really. Like that was like I'm just so hurt that you even thought about like that I would just go and just rib you like that. So we have Axel that is to tell both of these guys is like, well, hey, like, you know what? I'm gonna go out and how about you guys like go to this place with me and like hopefully like loosen up, have some fun. And they're going to a bar, and so Rosewood and Taggart have club sodas, but of course this is a strip joint. So Axel's going on and just kind of just doing this like kind of shimmy and this jiggle the whole time. He's like, yeah. So we have Axel that is going on and giving Taggart the evidence of coffee grounds in one of the boxes, alluding that there might be cocaine within Victor's company and that maybe Taggart should possibly look into it. So we have Axel who eventually, while at this bar just dancing it up, is to all of a sudden start seeing some guys walking in who are wearing trench coats, and it's a little bit too hot to be wearing stuff like that. Axel's going on telling Taggart, like, hey, do these guys look suspicious to you? Like, and I'm being serious here. So Axel is telling Taggart to go to the other guy, and Axel is going to take the other guy. So now we have the really funny part that I love every single time I watch this movie, where Axel is to go on and play this drunk. Philip! You changed, man! Philip, you know? Like, we're old friends, Phil! So, we have Axel consistently saying that this guy is Philip, and this guy's like, I don't know what you're talking about, guy. And so it just gets to the point where, like, Axel just keeps getting all over this supposed guy named Philip. And so he reaches out for this gun and is to kind of shoot the ceiling. Axel's to take him down, and we have Taggart who is to have this gun on this other guy saying like, hey, like, freeze, this is LAPD or Beverly Hills Police, whatever. Anyways, so both these guys are to be arrested, and we have Axel that's going on and is to want to come up with this cover story that Rosewood and Taggart were to do this bust, and like that they were both super cops, because of course that's what Axel goes on and tells Bogomil that like, hey man, like I was going on in this club just minding my own business, having a good time, and all of a sudden Rosewood and Taggart were like going into the bar looking at these guys suspiciously. And before I knew what was going on, like, they took them both down. They're super cops. They deserve to wear capes. And so we have Bogomil that's asking Taggart, it's like, is that the real story, Taggart? And Taggart's like, no, sir. Axel was to go on and was to eye the two men. And before we even knew what was going on, he already took down one of them, and I took down the other. And so Bogomil is just all right, and so Axel is going on and telling these guys, like, man, like, you ruined that story, you messed it up. Could have made you guys look good, but no, you messed it up. So now, fast forward. So Rosewood is taking Axel. Taggart is back in the precinct or in the station. So Axel is telling Rosewood that they need to go on to this warehouse because Axel didn't want to tell Bogomil, because he would do everything by the book, that there is going to be another shipment of coke being in this warehouse, and Axel wanted to catch these guys in the act instead of going on and waiting, because eventually if they did everything by the book, they'll never go on and find the shipment, and then Victor will get away with this to eventually just go on and find some other buyer. So I'm hoping at this point that I've kind of covered all this movie by now, because really, like, here's where we get to kind of some muddy waters, and me just wanted to transition to get to Victor's place, but we'll get there at some point. Let's go on. So we have Axel that is to pressure Rosewood into doing the right thing, and so Rosewood is like, man, like, I had to do like one simple job of just kind of driving you like out of the state, and I can't even do that right. And Axel's like, man, I love you. Like smooches. So we go on and we have Rosewood, who takes Foley to this factory, this warehouse, and we also have Jenny present at this same time, because this kind of lines this up perfectly. So we go on and we have Axel that is going with Jenny into this warehouse because Jenny wants to know what's going on, and she won't say no to anything. She wants to go with Axel into this factory. So Axel goes on into the factory, is finding the coke, and now all of a sudden we have like an ambush happening with Victor's men, going like, aha, like, we caught you. So now we have it to, of course, confessions are to be had. Jack has mentioned that, like, hey, yeah, Axel, I killed your friend. And, like, the other guy has to confess they gave him the bump in the back of the head. And so Axel is to just get beaten up. You would have thought he would have been quickly killed and been done with, but no. So Rosewood is starting to see Victor and all these other guys come into this building, and he's like, ooh, like, what's going on here? So Rosewood decides eventually to go into the building to see what's going on, realizing that Axel is to now be beaten up. Jenny is to be kidnapped and taken to Victor's mansion. And so we have Rosewood that is to come on in and start shooting, start murdering some guys. Wouldn't recommend it, but he does it anyways. So Rosewood starts to pop one guy, and then is to try to go on and see Axel just decking other guys and taking them down. So now we, of course, have it where the cocaine is in the factory, and so now Rosewood and Foley are running off to tell through the radio. Rosewood is trying to tell Taggart to go and investigate the warehouse, and so Taggart is trying to have a beat on where this cop car is, and so Taggart is realizing where they're possibly heading, so he's like, I'm going to hand the warehouse thing off to these two other detectives so they can go on and investigate what's going on there. I'm going to go on and I'm going to find where both Axel and Rosewood had led to. So while that's happening, we have Bogomil that is to see like a very empty like detective's room. So Bogomil's like, I didn't send anybody out anywhere. So Bogomil's asking this one detective, like, hey, where are all these guys? It's like, well, hey, like Taggart was gone 10 minutes ago, and like all these detectives had to leave. And so Bogomil's like, I think I need to go on and like send everybody and their brother where both Rosewood and Taggart are, because they're like, I have this feeling. So, and Bogomil is going to go personally there to see what's all going on. So we have Axel, Rosewood, Taggart all at Victor Maitland's place. And Axel is trying to pick this lock to try to get into this gate so he can save Jenny, because supposedly Taggart is like, well, hey man, we can get a warrant within 20 minutes. And Axel's like, well, Jenny could be dead in 20 minutes. Like, we can't wait. I'm gonna go on and like pick this lock. And so Taggart is going on and saying like, okay, fine. So he grabs this shotgun and he's gonna go in with all these guys, and they're like, yeah, let's bust some heads. So they go in there, and we have a very funny moment where Axel is to go on and find this thing of stairs, and we have Rosewood and Taggart who are just kind of fumbling over this thing that they just think is some kind of fence. So they're just trying to hop over it. And Axel's looking on as these guys are like struggling, having so much effort of like one guy trying to lift one up over, and to eventually find that Axel's like, oh my god, you guys gotta use the stairs. So they didn't realize it was their mistake. So as soon as Axel is to get up, Axel is to ask Taggart to like, hey, are you okay? And they get blasted with these machine guns. So now they're running off, and like they're running all over the place. They're getting blasted with these machine guns. We have Rosewood that makes his way over, and it's like, hey, like these machine guns, like really? So he hates machine guns. It's kind of funny because eventually Rosewood in the sequel becomes this like gun nut where he has like all of these guns on him. He's like Rambo, and eventually I think we have Taggart in the sequel, because I think in the third one like Taggart just gets replaced. So, but in the second one we go on and we have like just Taggart, who is just like, God, Billy, like you just have all these guns. It's ridiculous. But also, like we had Rosewood, who is to eventually, like I think through the third one, he was to go on and get like a higher up position, which eventually just kind of led him to help out Axel in the third movie. I don't remember what position that exactly he got, but probably might have been Bogomil's. But anyways, moving on. So, too much stuff about talking about the sequels, because this is technically at the end of the review anyways. So, Axel makes his way with these two other guys to make it through this place, start killing some guys off. Axel is asking cover from the other two guys while he goes on and kills one guy. These guys are all guys, so like they're just dudes hanging out, just popping off guns because they can. Random, I know. So we have it where eventually Rosewood and Taggart get separated from Axel, and so Axel is to go on and find Jenny through the compound of Victor's. Victor is to go on and realize that his fortress has been penetrated through these kind of buttons and beeps and whatever. So this whole map of his whole compound, and one dot is to tell him like, hey, we're invaded. How could this have happened? Because of course it did. So they basically just came through your back door. So we have it to where Axel makes his way through this place and is to have Victor, who's now to have a gun, to Jenny. And so we also have Bogomil, who is making his way also through this this compound as well as Axel is. So we have Jenny who goes and elbows Victor, getting herself free, and then both Axel and Bogomil at the same time both shoot into Victor, having Victor eventually fall down these flight of stairs and die horribly, viciously. Heaven forbid I actually know what happened to Jack in this film and if he was to get killed off, assuming he did. Anyways, because I think eventually, like, Axel does come for that guy at some point of this movie and takes him out, kills him. So, moving on, shoots him down. I'm assuming that's the only probably thing that I'm not quite sure of because I don't remember that part. I remember the wrap up of this movie, so let's get to that. So, now that everybody's after this to be dead from the bad guy's side, we now have to where Bogomil is to have to come up with this bogus story of how technically this all happened and Axel was just a guy who was just somehow involved in all this, and that Bogomil is telling his chief that Jenny was to go on and find the cocaine within her warehouse, and that led them to have Jenny reach out to Axel, and then Axel reached out to Rosewood and Taggart, and they went on to intercept these men, and that led to this all-out war within Victor Maitland's house. And the chief is like, "You're really expecting me to buy that whole story?" And Bogomil's like, "Yes, sir." And the chief goes and turns to Taggart, and he's like, "Well, sir, or well, son, Taggart, Sergeant Taggart, tell me the story. Tell me what really happened." Taggart's like, "Well, sir, like what the lieutenant just said, it's what happened." So the chief is like, "Okay, well, I guess congratulations is in order." So now after that is all done with, we have it where Axel is asking Bogomil, it's like, "Well, hey, could you do me one favor? Could you contact my boss and kind of smooth things over?" And Bogomil's like, "You know what, Axel, I think you've like worn out all your favors." So Axel's like, "Come on, you know?" So, but Bogomil's like, "I'll see what I can do." Like, "Okay, all right." Because we have it to where Axel is to mention, like, "Well, hey, like, how about I just become like a PI investigator that is to like just live in Beverly Hills, and like I'll just do that to just kind of bug the crap out of you guys because I love it here." And Bogomil's like, "I'll see what I can do." I'll see what I can do. So now we have it where, of course, both the detectives, Taggart, Rosewood, are just wanting to see Axel out of their town. Go, Axel, go away. So Axel is at this hotel and he's checking out and he's getting all his stuff. And it seems that the Beverly Hill police force is going to flip the bill for Axel. And he's like, "Oh, you guys are too much." And so Axel is to want to take these robes and is to give one to Taggart and one to Rosewood. And Axel's like, "Rosewood, whenever you're soaking wet and you just come out of the shower, you can think of me and the things we did." So, we have it to where Axel is giving Taggart this robe, and Taggart is like, "No, how about you go on and keep it?" And Axel's like, "Well, I've already had 4 that are in my sack." And he's like, "Oh, okay." So we have Axel then is to go on and is to take his items, put it in the car, and so before he's to see like the tail of these 2 detectives following him off, he's like, "Ah," because he wants to go on again and take these 2 detectives to this same bar, this shady spot, and like have like just share a beer. And Taggart's like, you know, Rosewood, I think we can finally like just do that. Like, I don't think one beer will kill us. And so it's like, all right, like okay, like you guys are loosening up. So yeah, like at the end of this movie, that's how of course everything is to end here, as we of course have misty-eyed between both Axel and both Taggart supposedly, and that's how this movie ends. So if that's it, I think I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. This is like longer than I expected, but then I also kind of expected for me to go on and have a number of things to still talk about, because there was the second moment with Surge where Axel was to go on and uh, ask for Jenny, and Rosewood was to go on and get that certain tea, and Surge was to like mention, it's like, well, like no sweat, I can give you some lemon wedge and this and that, and so, and you also kind of gotta wonder if possibly that weird soda drink called Surge was really just to have been named after the guy from Beverly Hills Cop. You always want to naturally assume that, but then it's also kind of funny that Surge didn't really last all that long. I think Surge ended up possibly eventually getting renamed into Mellow Yellow, maybe? I don't know the history on that, but you can correct me if you like. But, anyways, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody. Whoops.